There are people who speak very well and reason very well. They can explain all kinds of concepts, cite all kinds of books, even making others mistakenly think that they are at the highest level of intelligence. What they say seems to be drawn from a large data warehouse, but they do not live. On the contrary, there are people who talk less and do not even seem to know much, but just one sentence from them, a look, a way of living makes us speechless. It's like something in us has just been awakened, so true. Intelligence is not something that can be measured by the amount of knowledge, but by the depth of life inside. In an age filled with information, the difference between knowing and seeing becomes increasingly important. Knowing is accumulating, seeing is awakening. Knowing is something that can be copied, seeing is something that cannot be communicated. Knowing is a matter of the head, seeing is a matter of an awakened mind. And it is there that intelligence truly begins. Why are there people who study all their lives but are still stuck in ignorance? Why are there people who, despite never read any philosophy books, still live with understanding and compassion? The answer lies in the nature of intelligence, and it has levels. Everyone is living, thinking, behaving from a certain level of intelligence, and that level determines what they see, understand, and how they live in today's video. Let's go through the 5 levels of intelligence with Triad Tam. This is not a theory nor a ranking, but for you to be able to locate where you are in your inner journey. Not to add something to remember, but to try to see what you are hearing in you at the moment, at which level of intelligence. The first level of intelligence, borrowed intelligence, is the starting point for most of us. It is the stage where human perception is completely based on what others have said, written, taught. All understanding at this time does not come from real-life experience, but from memorizing, repeating and copying it like a mirror reflecting light from another source, but has never spontaneously emitted anything of its own people. At this level are often easily convinced by things that sound right, seems good, especially if it is said by a famous person or quoted from a famous book. They may talk about love, about enlightenment, about egolessness, about being. But everything they say comes from outside. They do not speak from where they have been, but from where others have stood. They know a lot about the truth, but have never lived in that truth. A recognizable characteristic of this level of intelligence is that people often cite them, quoting philosophers, scientists, saints, or anyone who seems superior to them. They always have the need to prove that they are right by clinging to the power of external knowledge. But that very clinging is proof that they have never touched the truth with their own hands and hearts. They believe that understanding is enough, but do not know that understanding without seeing is not living, is still a layer of separation between them and themselves. People at this level easily fall into the illusion that they have seen and understood because they say profound things that others admire. So they think they have reached a certain level of intelligence, but the truth is they are just lost in a maze of language. They repeat high-level words, not knowing that the words themselves are just signs. Not reality. They think they are getting there, but in fact, they are just running around in circles around an idea. A person at the level of borrowed intelligence is like someone who learns to swim by reading books about swimming. They can tell you the strokes, the physics of propulsion, even the anatomy of the human body in water, but if you push them into a pool, they will flail around in panic. And the sad thing is, the more they know, the more afraid they are to admit that they never knew. No one is at fault for being at this level. This is an inevitable part of the journey, but if we do not dare to look back, do not dare to admit the borrowing in our understanding, It is easy to turn knowledge into a prison and intelligence into an illusion. Only when we clearly see that we are repeating what others say will we have the opportunity to start listening to the inner voice where true intelligence can arise. The second level of intelligence, reflective intelligence, marks a very important turning point on the journey of awareness. It is no longer the accumulation of information from the outside, but begins to be a meeting with one's own inner self. This is the moment when people begin to doubt what they believe is right. No longer immediately believe in what has been heard, learned, or repeated up to now, but different from impulsive resistance. Reflective intelligence does not come from rebellion, but from a silent depth, a kind of gentle but persistent torment inside the mind. People at this level can continue to learn from books or others, but at the same time they begin to have a pause in receiving. That pause is very small, but it is a sign that true wisdom is beginning to form. They are no longer absorbing everything like a tape recorder. They begin to ask if this is true. Is this true to their life experience? Who is the one who believes this within themselves? And why believe this transformation is often accompanied by internal conflicts? Because people have to face the fact that what they have believed for so long, even things that are tied to their identity with their past, with their loved ones, religion, doctrine, may just be a shell. The truth is no longer as simple as a right answer. It becomes a matter of survival, and people are no longer at peace living on things that have never been verified by their own experience. Reflective wisdom opens the door to self-questioning, a process where the ego begins to crack. People are no longer easy on themselves. They find that they can be smart, but also very easy to deceive. They can argue sharply, but are afraid to look at the ugly truth about themselves. They begin to look back at the hidden motives behind their actions, realizing themselves believe something not because it is true, but because it gives a sense of security. This insight makes one humble, and no one can reach a higher level of wisdom without going through this stage. This is the foundation of all awakening, whether in philosophy, psychology, or meditation. It is the first light, although still weak, but has begun to shine into the hidden corners of the mind. And once this light has been lowered, people can no longer live pretending they may not know what the truth is, but they begin to smell the scent of lies, especially from themselves. Reflective wisdom does not create stability. It makes us insecure, but it is the necessary insecurity to leave the safe zone of confusion. It does not give us answers, but awakens in us a kind of inner honesty. And that honesty is the first seed of freedom. When a person begins to no longer be easy with the beliefs he is carrying, is also the time when true wisdom has begun to sprout. The third level, self-wisdom, is where every knowledge, reflection, and life experience begins, crystallized into a kind of understanding no longer dependent on words. If in the previous two levels we still cling to the outside or still struggle in doubtful reflection, then in this level wisdom has begun to settle in the body and mind. The things people have heard, read, and doubted have now either fallen away or have been tested by deep experiences in real life. People in this level are no longer hasty to share what they know not, because they are frugal with words, but because they understand that there are things that cannot be conveyed in words. Every life experience, every pain that goes through every time something breaks or is let go, all leave a layer of sediment in them, and it is from that layer of sediment that a type of wisdom that is completely different from ordinary wisdom is formed. It is not on the tip of the tongue, but remains silent in the eyes, in the way they face suffering, in the way they listen to another person without interrupting wisdom itself. Is not something that can be displayed. It is not as bright as the light of knowledge. It is not as sparkling as flowery words, but it has a special weight, a weight that does not come from authority or the degree that comes from being fully present in every moment of life. People with self-intelligence are no longer easily swayed by right and wrong on the surface, by praise and criticism. By intellectual temptations, they look at a person not through their academic degrees, not through their language, but through the quality of their life, whether they truly live what they say or are just acting out a sophisticated role. Another sign of this level of intelligence is the clear distinction between truth and falsehood. They do not need too much reasoning to recognize who is speaking the truth and who is just speaking from memory. That distinction does not come from experience or technique, but from a subtle sensitivity in their hearts. They hear what lies behind the words. They see what has never been said. Because they themselves have gone through those twists and turns, they have been hurt, broken, lost everything, and have seen that everything is just a temporary covering over the truth. Self-intelligence does not try to be smart. It does not seek to impress, it is just present. And from that presence, everything else becomes clear. Simple, profound people at this level can be silent throughout a conversation, but only need a timely word. All the noise will disappear. They don't need to prove anything because their presence is proof of what they see. If borrowed wisdom is light from the outside, reflective wisdom is light shining inside. Then self-wisdom is the smoldering fire from the heart, strong enough to warm, but also strong enough to burn away all the remaining fakeness. This is the level of wisdom where words and life begin to blend into one, where there is no longer a gap between what we understand and how we live. And that is what makes people at this level trustworthy, even though they don't need to try to convince anyone. The fourth level of wisdom, non-ego wisdom, is where the view is no longer distorted by the need to assert oneself. This is no longer the wisdom of an individual seeking the right for himself, but the view of a consciousness that has lost the shadow of the self. People at this level no longer consider themselves the center, nor use knowledge as a tool to determine victory or defeat, to create influence, or to paint their image. This transformation comes from the effort to eliminate the ego by will, but from the deep insight into the nature of the ego. It is an illusion formed by memory, habit of reaction, and the need to survive. When seeing that clearly, the mind no longer has to protect something called self, and from there all thoughts, feeling, actions begin to have a deeper honesty because it is no longer dominated by personal motives. Egoless intelligence is no longer concerned with right or wrong according to social or rational standards, but is concerned with what is really happening. People at this level can listen to a debate without having to intervene, not because they lack arguments, but because they see clearly what is operating underneath. They see the ego thirsting for recognition, fighting to maintain the idea of itself while others are still arguing. They have seen the whole mechanism of the mind, and that makes them become deeply silent. At this level, people no longer cling to any ideology, whether it is religion, philosophy, or science. They can use those languages to communicate, but no longer identify themselves with any system, because they have seen that all ideologies are products of time and cultural conditioning of the collective mind, and therefore nothing is absolute. They live in a freedom without having to resist anyone or reject anything because they are no longer locked in the framework of any rightness. Egoless wisdom is often accompanied by a kind of inner silence. Not the silence of restraint, but a natural silence when there is no longer a need to show off. They see everything that is happening where others will react. They just observe where others analyze, they just perceive, and where others cling to reason, they see the subtle workings of cause and effect, not because they try to understand spiritually, but because their minds have become transparent to reality. People at this level of wisdom often make others feel light without doing anything special. They do not convince anyone, but their presence can illuminate wordlessly. They no longer need to be listened to. But if they speak, their words carry a quiet precision. Not a good way of speaking that speaks right to the core that is being covered up. Because there is no one who needs to be elevated or protected in them, so all their knowledge becomes free, unbiased, egoless wisdom, like a calm lake that does not try to reflect, but everything that comes to it is clearly visible, and it is that lack of effort that creates deep insight, because there is no ego standing in the middle to interpret things that are seen as they are, no more, no less. And in that view, all concepts dissolve, leaving only the pure operation of reality, the final level of wisdom. Wordless wisdom, this is also where all concepts of wisdom also dissolve here. There is no one who knows, and there is nothing that needs to be known. Any attempt to interpret, describe, or analyze becomes redundant, because reality simply does not need to be named to exist. And what is in its purest presence is self-sufficient, without the need for an ego to stand in the middle to confirm it. People at this level no longer live by thought, not because they refuse to think, but because thinking is no longer the controlling center of their mind. They become like a silent space where every phenomenon of birth and death is fully received but leaves no trace. They no longer try to understand anything, because they have seen that the very effort to understand has created a distance between themselves and life. When the ego is silent, the truth resonates by itself, not in words, but in direct presence. Wordless wisdom is not opposed to ignorance, nor is it at the pinnacle of wisdom. It goes beyond every dichotomy. There is no longer a distinction between right and wrong, light and darkness. Enlightenment or delusion, each polarity dissolves into a complete seeing and the whole. Person at this level no longer sees himself as practicing, understanding, developing, but simply live fully in every moment they can work, chat, laugh, eat, wash dishes like everyone else, but deep inside, there is no longer any operating center controlling or directing behavior. There is no longer any question of whether doing so is right or not. What should I say or what people think of me, because the so-called self has dissolved into everything, and when there is no one standing alone, then all actions flow purely, simply, and without any problems. People at this level are often very normal and can even be misunderstood as nothing special. They do not say lofty things, do not show themselves as knowledgeable people, do not show themselves to be different. But if you are close to them long enough, you will feel a kind of deep stillness, a kind of presence as light as the wind, but as clear as the sun, does not carry any intention, but is always present completely. They do not need your admiration or acknowledgement, because in them there is no one who needs to be confirmed anymore. Wordless wisdom cannot be achieved by practice, nor can it be achieved by trying to overcome the previous levels of wisdom. It only appears when all efforts stop. When all desires become wisdom, all attempts to be enlightened, all identifications of the self dissolve in absolute letting go, only then what is always present can be seen. Not with the eyes, not with the mind, but with its own emptiness. If I have to use an image, then speechless wisdom is like the sunlight. It does not choose where to shine. It does not set a purpose. It does not need to be recognized by anyone as shining. It simply exists, and that very presence is the light. The person at this level is also no longer the one who knows, but has become the knowing, no longer the one who is seeing, but is the seeing that is present without limits. No possession, no words after passing through the 5 levels of wisdom. What remains is not a new definition nor a system of knowledge for you to remember or use later. What remains is just a question that quietly echoes within you. Where are you living from an ego that accumulates knowledge, or from a transparent mirror that has nothing left to protect? Each level of wisdom has a reason to exist. No level is wrong. It is only if we stopping too long at one level, life will begin to frame and we will be stuck in the very layer of understanding that we once thought was the truth. Some people are stuck in the borrowed wisdom level and think they have seen. Some people are stuck in the reflective level and think they are awakening. Some people stop at their own wisdom and turn it into a yardstick to judge others. Even at the non-ego level, if there is still the idea of non-ego, we have not completely escaped the shadow of the ego. Only when we enter the wordless level, where no one is walking and no one is understanding, do we realize that wisdom is not something that is accumulated, but what remains when there is nothing left to cling to. There is no longer I am the seer. There is no longer that which is to see. There is only pure seeing with no purpose, no form. But it is the foundation for a life of awareness and freedom. So the question is not what level you have known, but whether you are living from that truth or not. Do you dare to be silent before things you have not really seen? Do you dare to let go of the understanding that has been your support? Do you have enough courage not to become anyone, not to understand anything anymore, but just to live fully in what is wisdom, not to display, not to debate, not to convince anyone? Wisdom, if it is truly wisdom, will make you live more simply, more truthful. Less explaining, but more present. It will make you leave the noise of knowledge and enter the silence of a nameless knowing. And if after this journey you can sit back and let your mind go a little and listen to the sound of what is living within you, then maybe true wisdom has begun to gently touch you without your mind, not through philosophy, but through its unconditional presence. Thank you for always accompanying Triat Tam. See you again in the next video, and wish you, as always, wish you and your family good health.